In this lesson, we will be adding and subtracting matrices. So to go back to the mall problem, where we have the November and December shipments of t-shirts for mall 1 and mall 2, and it shows how many small, medium, and large are at each mall for each month. The first example says to write a matrix equation which describes the total shipment of each size to each mall during the November-December time period. So the key word here is total. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to add these matrices together. So since it wants an equation, I am going to rewrite each of them. So that first matrix, in row 1, we have the numbers 20, 35, 17, 18, 29, and 14. And just to include the labels, I'm going to put an S, an M, and an L, and then mall 1 and mall 2. I'll just put M1, M2. So I'm abbreviating a little bit here. And then I'm going to put a plus sign. And then the next matrix with the labels, we have M1, M2. And then once again, we have small, medium, large. And this time in row 1, our numbers are 11 small, 28 medium, 14 large, 17 small, 27 medium, and 12 large. So another key word here is we're writing an equation. Anytime you're talking about an equation, you should have an equal sign. And now it's time to actually do the work. So to write an equation here to get the total, we are going to be adding corresponding elements. So if you look at row 1, column 1 in the first matrix and row 1, column 1 in the second matrix, those two numbers are in corresponding spots because they're in the same row and same column. And since we're adding, we would add those two numbers together. So in my answer, 20 plus 11 is 31. And if I fill in the labels here, I'm talking about mall 1 in the first row, mall 2 in the second row, and in that first column we have small shirts and then medium and large in the second and third columns. So I still have to find the rest of row 1. Let's move across to medium for mall 1 where I have 35 and 28. So if you add 35 and 28 together, you will get 63 for that total. Then we have in row 1 just the large shirts remaining, so 17 plus 14 would be 31. Let's go ahead and move on to row 2. I'll highlight the smalls for mall 2 in green. So notice 18 and 17 are in the same spot, and if I add 18 plus 17, I get 35, which goes in row 2, column 1. Next to that, I have 29 for medium mall 2 and 27 for medium mall 2 between November and December. So if I add 29 plus 27, that would be 56 for the total medium at mall 2, and that leaves us with 14 and 12, so that last number would be a 26. So once again, the directions were to write a matrix equation. We have an equation here. We're adding the November and December matrices together to get our total shipment for the 2 months combined. Now part B says, how does your total matrix, which is kind of our answer over here on the right of the equation, how does this compare to each individual one? Well, the answer here is if you pay attention to the dimensions, for November the dimensions were 2 by 3, December the dimensions were 2 by 3, and look at our total. The dimensions here are also 2 by 3. When we're looking at dimensions, we don't include the labels, we just look at the numbers, and we have 2 rows and 3 columns. So how does our total compare to each one? I'm just going to put same dimensions, which means same number of rows and same number of columns. So in order to add and subtract matrices, this must always be true. You must have the same dimensions, or else it's not possible because you have to match up those corresponding elements. So when we look at example 2, it says, if possible, find the sum or difference. So let's check first if it's possible. This is a 2 by 2, and then we're adding that with a 2 by 2. Dimensions are the same rows and same columns, so this should be possible. And my answer will be a 2 by 2. So I'm going to start with 10 plus 6, which is 16. I'll choose a different color for the next column over. So I usually go row 1 all the way across first and then move down to row 2. So 5 plus 7 is 12. In the second row, we have 0 plus negative 8, which is negative 8. And finally, 1 plus 3, which is a 4. And there's our answer on part A. When I take a look at part B, I have a 2 by 3, and then I'm trying to add that with a 2 by 2. So if we were to start by adding these and then these, notice you run into a problem. You've got a third column here, and there's no third column here to match up with that. So this is not possible. And when it says explain why, there's a few different ways we can explain this. You can just simply say the dimensions are not the same, or specifically, in this case, the rows were the same, but the columns are not the same. So you could say not possible because our columns, not the same number of columns. Sorry about my handwriting here. Not the same number of, I spelled columns wrong, I forgot the N there. Columns, or like I said, you could have said the dimensions are not the same. So any of those explanations would work. All right, last one is a little different because this time we're subtracting, and it's really the same thing. You're just going to take the first row, first column, which is the number 8, and over here it's the number -4, so those correspond, but instead of adding, you subtract. So if you'd like to kind of show the work, you can write out a matrix where you're writing 8 minus -4, and then you're going to have a 3 minus, oh, I said I always work across, so let me actually do that. So next we have a -6, and we're minusing 7. Okay, so I'm not simplifying yet, I'm just kind of showing the work for now. I'll do row 2 all in the same color. Let's use green. So I have a 3, and then I'm subtracting a -2. So I'm putting 3 minus -2. And then a 6 minus 6. Okay, in the last row, I have a 9, and I'm subtracting a 4. And then I have a 10, and I'm subtracting a -3. Now, anytime you wrote a minus negative, you may have right away changed that to plus. So minus negative becomes plus positive in 3 of those elements. And now when I simplify, 8 minus -4, which changes to 8 plus 4, would be a 12. Across from that, in row 1, column 2, I have -6 minus 7, which is -13. In the second row, 3 plus 2 is 5, 6 minus 6 is 0, 9 minus 4 is a 5, and then 10 plus 3 is 13. So let me highlight here for you the final answer, which would look like this. Did you have to show that work? Not necessarily. I think that would be optional. If you could just right away go ahead and do 8 minus -4 is 12, go ahead and put down 12, and you can kind of skip that step. Normally you have to show all work, but I'd say in this case, with subtracting, you can just subtract each corresponding element right away, and that extra step I showed there is optional. All right, once again, to summarize here, what must be true about the number of rows and columns of 2 matrices to be able to add or subtract? And that is that they must have the same dimensions. So we must have the same number of rows and same number of columns for the 2 matrices, or else it's not possible. All right, that concludes our lesson on adding and subtracting matrices.